Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield. It is Tuesday, December 10th. Josh, I hope you had a lovely weekend. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, played some pickleball, went golfing on a sim. Like, good weekend. Doing the best.
Pickleball and golf, and he didn't play disc golf, and that's the problem right now.
Listen.
That's the problem right now.
It is currently 21 degrees in
fair,
Idaho.
I wouldn't be playing
indoor
either.
activities. Yeah.
I feel that. Well, hey, Tech Disc Sim exists. I've seen the prototypes.
I've got a Tech Disc. I love my Tech Disc, by the way.
You should start a Pocatello Tech Disc Sim business.
Are you interested?
Throw your money in right now. This is the time. This is the time to
I'm
make a
soliciting
leap
private equity investors into a Pocatello disc golf sim.
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about the industry a bit today, and we're going to begin with an interview with Trevon Crowe. He's MVP sponsored. He's in his early 20s, and he's out there living that disc golf grind life. He is not somebody who's cashing all the time on the pro tour. He's just over 1,000 rated, and is just kind of trying to make ends meet and get better as a pro, and believing in himself and living on the road. And we wanted to talk to somebody who was kind of in this position that's not on coverage much, that's not necessarily a household name, that's not cashing all the time, and kind of see what's the motivation, what's the plan, how are you going to do this in the future, what's your sponsorship situation. So we're going to dig into all of that with Trevon right now. We'll be right back. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. If you're looking for the perfect holiday gift for somebody that you love, or hey, maybe yourself, you deserve it too. Go to pounddiscgolf.com and make the custom pack of your dreams. You can do the custom pack builder for all of their packs, whether it's an Octothorpe, Rufus, Vagabond. You can design it exactly how you want. The outside fabric, the zippers, the attachments, the patches, every little bit of the bag fully available to be customized by you. And you can do it all at pounddiscgolf.com. Hey, just go check it out, build a pack of your dreams, and maybe you put it in your cart and think about it for a couple days. Well, temperatures are dropping, days are shorter, but our day-to-day stresses remain the same. As we wind down 2024, you deserve to rest and recharge. Thankfully, one of our sponsors can help with that. Folks over at Sunset Lake have kicked off their Black Friday sale. Right now, you can save 30% site-wide when you head to sunsetlakecbd.com and use the code FRIDAY. They've got everything you need to chill out and enjoy your time this holiday season, from tinctures to gummies to topicals and even products for your pets. Sunset Lake is even throwing in some freebies this year. If your order is over $100, they'll give you a free 20-count jar of Relax Functional Mushroom Gummies. And if it's over $200, you'll get a 20-count jar of the same. I tell you what, they've got the new non-melatonin sleep gummies that have just a little bit of THC in them. Really, really nice. Super nice way to relax at the end of the day and get some great sleep. So head over to sunsetlakecbd.com and use the code FRIDAY to save 30%. See their site for terms and conditions. Joining us now on the Upshot is Trevon Crowe. He's an MVP-sponsored player out of Indiana. He just finished up a big touring season in 2024. Trevon, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Charlie.
Well, thank you for being here. You are one of many players who is not necessarily up on the top of the Jomez coverage every week. And so we wanted to have you on and talk a little bit about what is tour life like for someone who is not a Calvin Heimberg or a Gannon Burr or something like that, the people that we tend to talk about a lot about on this program. So we will get into that. First, I would love to hear a little bit more of your disc golf background for the audience. How you came to start playing, what your journey has been like going from, the junior divisions into playing pro, and kind of just like what, your story is.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. First off, the, I mean, my story's kind of similar to a lot of players. I started in the junior division, 10 years ago, and I moved my way up to playing locally pro events and still traveling to play like Am Worlds and things. And I started making the connections that I needed to when I played junior worlds and stuff. I met Casey White, and we've been friends since. Um, and I just slowly started moving my way from MA1 to locally pro, and then eventually around 2018 turning pro, taking cash, and then COVID really slingshotted me to trying to go on the pro tour. I wanted to travel. I was on online college, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to just try out traveling. And so I just jumped into it. And back then it was a little easier. You only needed to be 1,000 rated or so to cash on the tour. So it was a little different even just 5 years ago. But that's I've been doing it ever since. I didn't think I would still be traveling like this 5 years later, but it's been opportunity of a lifetime.
So you say that you were doing online college. Have you since graduated? Are you still finishing school while you're touring? If not, are you doing additional work in addition to touring, like remote work, for example, while you're traveling?
Yeah, good question. When I first started on tour in 2020 and 21, I was finishing online. But since then, no, I don't do any more college. And in 2021, 22, I used to work in the winters when I came back home to Indiana. And I would do like construction work with a friend that I graduated with. But the last couple of years with MVP support, I haven't really had to do that quite as much. Every now and then when I want to fill some time, I will work here and there, but mostly it's all workouts and disc golf related stuff. I go down to Florida after the new year, and I just play some A tiers. The Tallahassee Opens usually right around then and stuff like that. So don't really work too much in the winters now, and not during the year either. I mostly fill my time with other A tiers to pay the bills, basically.
Yeah. So, maybe you could tell us a little bit about like how you approach your season. You played a ton of events. I think probably way more than a lot of touring pros. And, at the pro tour events, you played a lot of them, but mostly didn't cash. I know you cashed at Jonesboro and maybe like a Q Series type a tournament or two, but how do you make that work? If you're not cashing on a week-to-week basis?
Well, like I said, I fill my weeks with a lot of A tier tournaments. I was just curious before we got on here, and I looked, because I'm good friends with Simon, and I looked and he played 19 events this year, and I played like 40 some. like I don't have off weeks. I play every week basically, and like those A tier tournaments, because you don't need the 1030 to 1040 rated tournaments to make money. You can do it with 1015, 1020, and 1020 usually is a pretty decent payout. So those tournaments in between the pro tour stops usually pay the bills. So I have to do a lot of extra scheduling to make sure that I'm planning tournaments in the right areas in between the pro tour stops.
you made about $7,000 from playing from winnings at other tournaments. Tell us a little bit about what your tour setup looks like. Are you in a van? Are you in the back of a Prius? Are you using Airbnbs and hotels? And how much would you say that you're staying on tour and just disc golfing full time costs for you in a year, just on that annual basis?
Well, let's see. I do have I have a van. I do like the van life. Um, and I have like a group of people that I travel with. I travel with Casey White and Simon, and a lot of the times I park my van outside Airbnb, or we have a host that hosts us, and just having hosts across the country that allow us to park our vans and stay with them. That tends to save a lot of money. Um, it I would say that my tournament winnings probably basically are about how much it costs me to stay on tour or to stay on the road. And MVP also is really supportive of me and helps me out. And that's where I have a little extra money to keep going. I don't believe that I would be able to do the full pro tour without the support that MVP gives me, because I just, like you said, I only cashed a couple times on tour, and I don't think it would be sustainable. But for now, I'm still trying to find that gear.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your MVP contract and kind of like what it offers? Are they covering your tournament buy-ins? Is it a stipend-based system? How is that contract laid out?
Yeah, MVP, they do pay for my tournaments, and they do give me a small salary. And then there's also they do like tour series discs on their website and stuff, that like a signature, not like a signature series, but just like a touring stamp for their touring and professional players. So that in itself, the small salary I get a month helps keep me afloat.
Do you have an estimate in terms? You say you have that tour stamp. Do you know how many tour stamp discs you sold in 2024?
I did not sell any. I didn't run a tour stamp last year, although I will be doing it this year now that our team series website is like our MVP Pro Shop website is up and running. I didn't make it a priority last year because there were other people that it just wasn't a high priority for me, just because selling discs is pretty difficult unless you're Simon. Like there are people who do it, and I will do it this year. It just there was a lot of background stuff going on that I did not do that last year.
I want to follow up real quick then, Charlie, if that's okay. So you have this multi-year deal and are going to be with MVP in 2025, and we joked before the show that what a benefit that is to have a contract locked down. We've already seen announcements of players who are around your rating or even a little bit higher rated than you, who have announced that they are not going to be touring next season because financially it's just not going to make a lot of sense for them. Can you tell us a little bit about, I'm sure you're connected to the pro community and there are other players in your range. What is it like out there right now amid the slowdown of the industry for those trying to seek new sponsorships? Should we anticipate more players dropping out?
I think a lot of the dropping out comes from other circumstances. Some of it is people who can't financially keep going. They just would rather do other things that are a little more secure. because it is the markets are heating up to where they're just not sustainable anymore. And it is really nice for me to be on a multi-year contract to not have to worry about that right now. I would say that as people hunt around and the people who aren't sponsored, they might, and they see what the conditions are like through other companies. I think you're right. I think you might see more people, or at least changing tactics. Like I plan to play a couple more A tiers this year, and try, like, in between, maybe not play a tour event or two. But we'll see how the season starts. But you might see people playing, moving to more of an A tier type schedule rather than the Pro Tour.
So what's your status for next year? You played at the Q Series finale.
Yep.
You finished 6th. So I believe that qualifies you for like I don't know what they call it, like a partial card,
like a
silver card, half card. So what exactly does that mean? And how will that impact your ability to play at, as many of the Pro Tour events as you'd like to play?
Well, yeah. So I didn't get the full tour card. The partial card it will basically allow me to get into the events that I want to guarantee myself in, that are hard to get in. And I think that I can get in via rating on other ones. Like, there are tournaments throughout the year, like Ledgestone, Idlewild. I'm trying to think of the other, like, super hard ones. Waco is usually fills up pretty quickly. Basically, it will allow me to guarantee myself in those events without having to worry about whether it's a ratings-based registration or not. But basically, the other tournaments, the other Pro Tour stops, I'll have to sign up with rating on the ratings tier. So it adds a little bit of stress to signing up for some of those tournaments that I'm not already signed up with the partial card.
You, speaking of ratings, then, so you're currently rated 1,003. I didn't pull. That's right around your peak. It looks like you were 1,005 a little bit earlier this year. So that low thousands mark is kind of where your top rating has been. These days, it feels like on tour, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier when you were talking about A tiers. Most players who are cashing regularly are in the 1020s, and you're needing to play closer to the 1030, even 1040 marks at some of these tournaments in order to get cash. What do you see? You also mentioned that you have been on tour longer than you ever thought you would be. What do you see as, like, your future on tour? And are you confident that you're going to be someone who's going to be up on Jomez, that you're going to be in that 1020, 1030s group? What is the plan to get there? I'm really curious just to know what you see as your career path on the Disc Golf Pro Tour.
Well, like you said, 1020 is about the range you need to be to consistently cash. I believe that I can be a 1020 to 1030 player, like a lot of people do, and there are a lot of people who are in my ratings bracket that feel the same way, because when you look at it, the difference between my rating to a 1020 rated player is about, like, 2 strokes around. And because when you get to this, it seems like 2 strokes around would be easy to manufacture, but it becomes difficult. And I've shown to myself that I can be that player, to myself at least. And I am committed to trying to work on, fix that consistency issue and be a touring disc golfer. I think that I have that. I think that I have that ability. I just have I have a couple of kinks that I need to work out to make those improvements. And I'll just continue to keep working on it until I decide that I either can't do it or want to take a different path.
Like, can you give us a sense of like, are you just living A tier to A tier basically? You know, do you have some money saved that lets you fill the gaps? I mean, it's not necessarily that expensive to live on the road as long as you have a vehicle and, you know, gas prices are fairly reasonable right now. So, you know, how do you buy your groceries? How do you, like, what are you eating? Like, how do you live on, you know, sub $10,000 a year if you're not also like working on the side?
It depends on it depends on the swing that I'm in, because most of the time my disc golf season comes in swings. If you look at my schedule, I have like a really good month and a half and then a really bad month and a half, and by the end of the bad month and a half, I'm getting down to living tournament to tournament. I have a little money saved back, but not a lot. It is pretty much going from tournament to tournament, trying to cash. And then again, having MVP support me, knowing that I have something that comes in to pay the bills. It makes a huge difference in my ability to tour. But yes, if I do, it does come down to, you know, week to week and then month to month sometimes on needing to cash and needing to fill these A tiers to pay the bills.
Have you ever made an in-tournament decision based on the idea of securing, like knowing that you needed to secure money for the next week? For example, you have a death putt that could jump you up into like a tie for first, but missing it could drop you 10 spots or 5 spots. And so you lay up and take second or third place because the difference between that cash and where you would be if you missed that putt is significant enough to your earnings that you're willing to take to mitigate the risk in order to take the money.
I see what you're saying, and most of the time it's all too, you know, fluctuating at the time to know exactly. It's a little different mentality to me. A lot of times it's more of, I feel like, and this has happened a lot this year for tour events, and is that it kind of sometimes hangs over my head in final rounds of like, I can start well and then I get to the final rounds and you know, it hangs over your head a little more on, okay, well, you know, if I make this mistake here, this could really hurt. And it makes I wouldn't say that it changes my decision making a whole lot, but it changes how I feel about the rounds as they go. There are times that in the final round, I might string together 5 birdies and I just can take a deep breath and just be like, okay, I can relax now. You know, not relax, but I can play a little more free flowing. Whereas a lot, you know, if I have a bogey or make a misstep, it feels a little tighter than it normally would. But if I ever was in a situation like you were saying, it would be something worth considering of, you know, I would rather lay up here than risk, you know, missing out on extra money. Whereas, you know, somebody like Gannon or Ricky, they just go for the win.
Is it fun being out on the road? I mean, I think a lot of people probably are listening to this and thinking, damn, that just sounds like too much of a grind. But you must be enjoying it, considering that you've done it for a few years now and you're going back out again.
Yes. And that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier when you were talking about the people who are dropping off the tour there, because everybody has their own limit of what they want to do. And at some point, and I said it before, there will be a time I don't want to continue the way I am going forever. But for now, I still enjoy it a lot. And I have a good support group on tour. We have a good travel. My friends are on the tour, and as of now, I'm more than happy to continue as I have been and keep trying to grind it away. But eventually the grind becomes too much it'll become too much for me, and it becomes too much for other people. You see it as everybody is taking a step away.
So you described this good support group that you have, and you've talked about staying at Airbnbs and outside of Airbnbs where you can park your van, which I'm sure gives you opportunity to kind of stretch and hang out at the Airbnb with this support group. How important are players like Simon, for example, who makes a lot more money on his contract, to facilitating players like you and others in that group have a more enjoyable tour experience?
I mean, Simon does a lot for our group. He gets a lot of times he gets an Airbnb and kind of facilitates the Airbnb, and usually he takes a good chunk of the Airbnb price, and we still pay. We still pay for our side of the Airbnb, but he does take a good chunk of it, and allows us to have the place to hang, but not for the price that not for the full price that you would normally pay. And having the van, I don't need the bed and and the space inside, so there's usually a discounted price for that too. But yeah, you're right. Having somebody like Simon who doesn't have to worry about how much the Airbnb is per se, it makes a huge difference. It really facilitates a lot of spots for us throughout the year.
Does Simon act as kind of like a tour manager of sorts for MVP? I sometimes get that sense that he's kind of like helping make some of the decisions, or thinking about. He was talking in a kind of like a podcast, I guess, a YouTube video with Drew Gibson recently, which I highly recommend to everybody listen to. It's very interesting. Just kind of like how he's like helping them look for sponsorship opportunities in the market this off season. So I'm curious, like, does he act as sort of like the MVP liaison out on the road?
I would say that I would say that he has a very important voice in what, I don't know the exact ongoings. I just know that he's very smart and has a good intuition for things. And I would say that he does have some kind of voice in, the market of players that, we might, the MVP might look for, or, having Eagle on there, you could probably see that a little bit, adding Eagle to the team. But, yeah. And even like with, new discs and things, he has a good opinion of like the discs that are coming out, and, what we're looking, what we would want to look for, stuff like that. I think they take his thoughts into consideration on a lot of matters.
MVP has been on just an unbelievable trajectory after the James Conrad shot at Worlds, and they've just successfully executed marketing decisions down the road from that have continued to compound the value that's come from that single shot, and we see that spillover effect to players like you as well, who get opportunities to have stipends on tour, that I know some players in pre-COVID would probably say they never had before. When you first signed your deal with MVP, did you have comparable offers in terms of like structure, like a stipend or multi-year offers? Obviously MVP probably the best given that you signed there, but what was it like in relation to other offers that you may have seen?
When I signed with MVP at the end of the James Conrad World Championship year, I was unsponsored that year, and at the end of the season, I had interest from a couple other companies at the time, but I had toured that year with Raven Newsom, and he was also touring with our team manager at the time. So I had made the connection with them and didn't really look at anybody else. But basically, the offers were at the time were about the same. MVP's was a little better, but MVP I definitely got into MVP at the right time. Like you're saying, I got in right as we started the crazy climb, and the offers that the deal that I have with MVP is just like you're saying, that it's just not a deal that a lot of players get the opportunity to have, especially players of my rating and my standing on the tour. And so I wouldn't trade that for the world, because they've supported me where basically nobody else would, and that's hard to turn my back on.
When is your contract up? End of next year?
Yes, end of next year.
What do you think you need to do to convince them to renew your contract for 2026 and beyond?
I would say securing a tour card for 2026 would be a good start. That would, just not just securing a tour card, but what comes with securing a tour card. Consistently cashing, sneaking it, getting up into top 20s or higher, doing things that you would want to, doing things that you need to be a touring player, because I don't want to continue to force trying to tour. I would, if I can't secure that on my own, I wouldn't ask them to renew the same contract, to be honest, because I've had the opportunities to do that. And if I can't secure it, I wouldn't want them to give me the exact same contract, just because they put a lot of faith in me and they have supported me, and I want to do the same for them. So I want to give it my all. And if I can't be a touring player, I want them to, give a shot to a different touring player. I think I would still be sponsored by MVP, probably play more A tiers if I wanted to get off the tour. But I wouldn't ask them to continue to support me the way that they do if I moved off touring, because a lot of the support comes from not cashing. They give me the support to play on tour, and if I'm not doing that, if I'm not going to be on tour, wouldn't ask for the exact same support from them. I would want them to support somebody else who would want the opportunity, if that makes any sense.
Sure. I want to follow up. I was looking at your stats on the Pro Tour page. You're a good Circle One putter, top 20 on tour. But in other categories, you in some cases are dead last in like Circle One and Circle Two in regulation. Obviously, that's the area to get better at. For most people, that's going to define their scores overall. What do you think you specifically need to get better at? Is it a distance thing? Is it a let's call it shot making, giving yourself those opportunities to look at birdies?
So a lot of my problems comes from pretty much backhand consistency, which is one of the biggest things you need on tour. The distance is typically like acceptable, but I have spurts in the season where I just don't have the consistency. And when it comes from week to week, 1 week it's acceptable and I can make good shots, especially with the backhand. And then next week, all of a sudden it's not there. It causes a lot of problems because I don't know which shot to choose. I have a really good sidearm. And so that if I lean on that, I can stay pretty consistent, but backhand, and the distance that comes with that, also like longevity in the sport, it's just the way to go. So it's my biggest issue has been the consistency on going week to week, tournament to tournament, and continuing the consistency and not making the errors. Because I could argue that sometimes if I threw more sidearms, I would be a little more consistent, but I think my ceiling would be lower. I think my ceiling is higher with backhand, but it causes more problems. So my biggest thing is working the consistency and figuring out why it is that I make because like there's been times throughout even this season and the last couple of seasons where I go through a month and I'm extremely lost when it comes to my backhand form and the mistakes that I'm making. And then the next month I might average 1025, 1030 or and it's been a very roller coaster season or two in the last couple of years. So if I can figure out that consistency, I think that I can make the transition to the 1020 to 1030 rated player.
You've talked a little bit about kind of what might happen after the next season. Since you started touring on the Pro Tour full time, do you have an exit ramp strategy, like what you plan on doing after you're done with tour? If you reach a point even mid-season that you're like, this is it for me. Do you know where you're going to go, what you're going to do, what the plan is? Or have you tried kind of to not think about it and really just focus on, doing the best you can and enjoying the tour?
I have a couple of tentative exit strategies, backup plans. Some, I those have changed over the last couple of years. I do have some trade knowledge, and I do like if I needed to tomorrow, I could work construction and other trades and make enough money to figure out what I needed to do, and then I could go back and do some more schooling. I've considered that. I love to coach. I love basketball, and I love to coach. And I thought that I could, if I wanted to, if I stopped with disc golf, I could go back and coach and work on coaching, high school, college basketball. I have a lot of basketball connections back home in Indiana. So I've considered that, but basically it's all tentative plans, which it's helped to have the idea of a backup plan, just knowing that I have something I can go back to rather than like, if I quit now, I don't know what I'll do. I have some ideas, but nothing that I basically am just waiting for that day, and I'll answer that question the day I make that decision.
Well, it's you got a good head on your shoulders. I mean, for you to come in here and say, if I don't step up, then I'm not going to ask MVP to like keep giving me the bag. Like I don't think a lot of players would necessarily say that. Last question for me. how do you feel like the Pro Tour is doing right now, and kind of like handling the pro scene, and the way that they're running their schedule, just generally how things are going on the professional circuit?
Well, it's hard to say. I think the Pro Tour is doing good. It's really hard for me to have an idea exactly. I mean, I really am not sure. They seem to be doing fine, but it's hard to really to know the ins and outs. I'm sure some people do, but I don't know the ins and the outs of the tour, the Pro Tour itself.
Let me frame this question just a touch differently for you then. Obviously you have independent tournament directors who get on the tour and are hosting their own tournament, but there are certain standards that come with having that you have to meet in order to be on tour. Do you notice a significant difference in the operations of some of the A tiers that you attend versus a Pro Tour? And do you feel like the operational quality of Pro Tour events is elevated above that of your standard A tier?
That is a big yes. Because I do play a lot of A tiers in between, and it comes to it is a shock sometimes to me when I go play an A tier, certain A tiers and I just there's no defined out of bounds lines. There's the OB itself on holes are undefined. There's we don't get player emails. There's no communication. It definitely does come as a shock to me sometimes on how high my standards have gotten on what tournaments look like. And there are some A tiers that I think are amazing and are ran to a near Pro Tour level standard. Like Marshall Griffiths is the tournament director for Tallahassee in Florida, and they have run a Silver Series, and there's a reason why, is because he runs really good tournaments. But there are other A tiers that I just can't. It just blows me away sometimes, the standard that I've gotten used to, and I do hear there are a lot of complaints from other touring players for tour events, and I can never really imagine why. I think we've elevated that standard so high that any A tier that can come close to that standard is, as a player, from a player standpoint, I don't see how we can complain about the standard of the Pro Tour.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, Trevon, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck next year, and hope you enjoy your off season.
No, thank you for having me, Charlie and Josh. I really appreciate it. It's I'm glad to share a little perspective on my side of things. That's not the Gannon Burr lifestyle.
Well, we all aspire to getting better. Trevon, thank you, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Upshot. Well, very interesting thoughts there from Trevon. This is the reality for, he is like at the bottom of players who are touring, like we call a regular tour, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like playing a lot of Pro Tour events. Like he's very near the bottom of that. But this is the reality for the bottom, like 25%, maybe even up to like 40% of the tour.
Yeah. Yep. It requires a dedication and love of the game that I don't have. And good for him. It's going to be interesting to see how, because like, I don't think we're ever going to have a lack of those kind of people who are willing to go out and basically live, A tier to A tier in order to play. It's interesting though. And the big question is like, he very clearly makes it sound like MVP is without MVP support, he would not be able to make it on the road. And like that little bit that he gets for MVP is a critical difference. So what happens if sponsors like MVP start pulling those contracts as this market?
It's surely happening.
Right? Yeah, has to be.
I mean, look, if you're paying attention to the conversations going on around the internet right now, like, the reality is that things are seeming to be getting a little bit worse rather than a little bit better. I mentioned during our interview with Trevon that Drew and Simon did a podcast over on Drew's channel. I mean, it's not technically a podcast, I guess, but that's effectively what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about a bunch of different stuff about their time coming up on tour, you know, what they had to do to grind it out when they were younger and they were not getting much money, how things are now, and then kind of like some of the things that are going on in the industry. And one of the things that Drew mentions is that, and I've heard this rumor a couple of times, is that companies are restructuring contracts for even top 10 level players and slashing the amount that they are paying. Now, you know, it's hard to say without knowing more, and maybe we will at some point, about whether that's like allowed, right? Are they breaking the contract, or is it written in there? Like, if I'm a company, I'm certainly writing it in there that after X years, there is a renegotiation period. And if you don't hit these certain benchmarks of sales or whatever, that they can restructure the contract. And so people are seeing their salary, if you, or just let's call it the total value of their contract being revised downwards north of 50, and Drew said even 75%, like massive cuts. And again, this all makes sense. Like, the money that was there 2 years ago is not there now. And I feel like there's almost a sense of complacency among pros that, like, this is just how it is now. Like, we just get to have these fat contracts. And listen, I think it's absolutely terribly brutal for a player to have some sort of expectation about how much they're going to be being paid for each year of their contract, and then having that taken away from them. And of course, if the company is breaching the contract, well, then you can get a lawyer and you can take them to court about it. We obviously saw that go the other direction with Prodigy and Gannon Burr. But when, you know, you're seeing people having their compensation slashed by their, you know, let's remind ourselves, right? This is a sponsorship deal designed to generate money for the company. And, you know, the problem is, Josh, we were talking about this a little bit last week at some point. The tour payouts are predicated on having these players filling these tournaments and not cashing, in order to make the payouts at the top at least attractive.
Yep.
And so if you want to say, well, these players just shouldn't tour, they get them out of there. Okay, well, are we going to go down to having 60-person tournaments? We could do that, but then payouts are going to go down 50%. That there is no alternative. And it's not like the Pro Tour is rolling in cash right now.
Right. You know, Charlie, I know of a golf league that just went and courted a really rich Saudi fund that kind of took care of that money problem. Do you think the Saudis are interested in this golf league? So we can guarantee payouts.
I know you're making a joke. I will say, I think the Pro Tour is in a spot where a large multi-million-dollar fundraising round would not be out of the question.
I think so too.
Because fundamentally, they have a business model that makes sense, at least on the media side, right? They have 50,000 people paying them money to watch disc golf. Now, the question is, will that number go up next year, or are we going to see that drift down as well? And that would obviously be concerning. But still, like, that's a lot of money coming in. That's millions of dollars coming in. How do you make that work with everything else that you're trying to do? like I'm hearing that some players still have not been paid for the Pro Tour Championship.
That's
so like,
tough.
I mean, it's December 10th.
Yeah.
What that suggests cash flow problems.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, it does.
So I think it's just, it's maybe even tougher out there than we've been talking about, or that is been like made clear. Like, obviously companies don't want to project financial weakness. But I think we're going to see major overhauls. I think we're going to see good players have a hard time finding new deals. And I think watch out for what happens with the open bag market, because I think that's a pretty good signal that players couldn't find a better alternative.
That's a great point. The thing that was interesting to me is that Simon highlights in his video that he didn't receive a stipend, like a salary, for decade before before COVID. Maybe not quite a decade, but before COVID. Like
he said, the first 4 years,
4 years
of his pro career, he didn't get a stipend, or they didn't have a salary.
Salary, yeah. So the thing is, like, top pros, even it was the top. Right now, the top of the top get the $1 million deals, but before it was like, oh, you're top of the top, you get a monthly paycheck then. And that's just a guaranteed monthly amount, because most pros that was not the case. And they talked about, they used to run clinics, and you were vending discs, and you were hosting, these exhibition events in order to raise additional money. And they talk about how, clinics it's difficult to get people to sign up in clinics. The grind that pros used to do compared to just like throwing a clinic up in the city and calling it good, it's very different than what pros are doing today. And I think you're going to see a lot more pros revert back to pre-COVID of what it looked like, where they were, it was a grind, and they were having to diversify their income streams, not just from their manufacturer, because they had to sell discs, they had to raise, individual money through clinics, through events, and that's, I think, going to probably become the norm again over the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, I also think companies made terrible mismanagement decisions in many cases about the sponsorship stuff. Like, everything was selling, so it didn't really matter. Mm-hmm. But like, to me, the whole question is a player generating ROI above and beyond what you would have gotten otherwise? Because if not, then they're not worth sponsoring.
Yep.
I'm like, I know I'm sounding a little harsh by saying that, but like, is the player, because they are on your team, causing more people to choose to purchase your product or buy their disc? I saw an interesting comment somewhere recently that was basically like, if somebody wants to buy a particular disc from a manufacturer, but they opt to buy the Tour Series version because that's like the one, the plastic like type that they want, but it has nothing to do with the player. It's just like they want that disc in that plastic, and that the only way to get it is to buy the Tour Series. Like, that is getting chalked up as a sale to the player. But like, in reality, if they just made that plastic disc combo,
right,
and they put a generic stamp on it, they would have sold it just the same. Like, how much of that is going on? Like, how many players really move the needle? I think the players who got the big fat 6-figure contracts, they move the needle.
They move the needle.
Does everybody else move the needle? I'm really not convinced that they move the needle.
I'm not either.
So I think I understand why that like middle of the market is going to look a lot bleaker this year, because I think companies are realizing that there's not necessarily ROI there. And I think players have to realize that if they are not an elite player, a very, very, very strong player, which of course, by definition, most are not, that they are going to have to put in the work in order to deserve a contract. That means doing social media. That means, making YouTube video. Like, it's work. It's work.
Mm-hmm. It's work.
You probably can't just show up and play the disc golf tournament and cash $500 and think that, you deserve a $50,000 a year salary from your sponsor. Yep. Sorry.
And unfortunately, your practice round does not move the needle, right?
But it could if you have the personality and the moxie to make it happen.
Agreed. No. Agreed. I mean, sorry. Let me rephrase that. Your unfilmed practice where you're going to the gym and just going out and getting ready for the tournament, like, and then still not cashing, does not move the needle. So you have to monetize your week. I
want to see somebody go out there and like do a vlog every week and actually take us through it, right? Like the time when you're like crying in the van because you played like crap and you're like worried about making your rent money or whatever, or your gas money. Like I don't want to like, I'm not saying that I want to just see everybody be miserable, but like, I feel like pros often sort of present this like everything is wonderful image. And everybody does that, right? That's social media in some ways.
Yep.
But I think a more authentic approach to like the highs and lows of touring is much more interesting than sort of just making it sound like you're living the dream when it's hard.
Yep.
Like that was one of the great things about that 6X Page documentary, right? We got to see her like struggling at times. And she was, at that time, the, undisputed number one in the world. Number one in the world. And we got to see like real positive and negative emotions. And I think more pros could stand to do that. I agree with you, Josh. I think we're going to see a big change in just about everything next year.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. Cause I already can sense the comments like, well, they're key to the entertainment. Like manufacturers need to be sponsoring them to support the tour. And like, we have to like, here's the issue.
Manufacturers are responsible for marketing the players.
Correct.
And there's truth to that.
There is, but I think this is truly a problem because they're right. Like Ganon loses value if there is not a healthy tour available, right? If it is an unstructured, multiple competing tours, he's just bouncing from tournament to tournament, that Ganon does not offer as much value in that world. But it is a problem, like it's a hazard of the commons where everybody benefits from having a healthy tour, but nobody wants to pony up and pay all the money in order to keep it healthy. And, there to an extent, those manufacturers sponsor tournaments and they do put in some effort, but I don't think it's fair to say that these manufacturers should just continue to sponsor a whole bunch of 1,000 rated players that don't move the needle for them in any way, shape, or form and return any value. And they are literally just throwing money away. It's players have to take more accountability in how they're going to earn money. And that's something that I think Trevon, you highlighted this, Charlie, and deserves a lot of credit for, is he understands that he's got to add value to the company. And I think he's going to be conscientious of that as, how he kind of adapts, hopefully, because I think more players need to be, otherwise you're going to start seeing teams get thinned out really, really fast.
Very interesting times. I mean, obviously, we all want to see everybody succeed, right? If more money is coming into the Pro Tour, well, payouts are going to go up. And if more people are watching and paying attention and getting involved in disc golf, then manufacturers are going to do well. And that means the players are going to do well. And we're going to see that positivity that was just flooding the sport for 2020, 2021, 2022. And you want to get back there, but I think we all have to grapple with the fact that like that was a kind of like once in a lifetime type of market environment where people were being kind of pushed into disc golf by external forces that isn't likely to be replicated. So how do you now think about building the next wave of sport growth? I'll give you a little fact though, like things that maybe you can feel positively about. I was just looking at the PDGA numbers through maybe September or October, like the membership numbers, and they're down a little bit on the year. But what I did see is that the number of new people who are signing up for a PDGA membership for the first time is more than double the number that signed up in 2019.
That
just 5 years ago. And that the baseline fundamental is that you have more than double the number of people joining the PDGA, right? So like that obviously is not necessarily a perfect proxy for overall participation, but people are coming in. The problem is that there's also a lot of people that are outflowing from COVID times. And once those people outflow, which they will, things will stabilize.
Yep.
And we will start to see manufacturer sales going up and things will come back into equilibrium. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I do think that it's a very positive signal that you still have like lots of new people getting involved. It's just that we have to think more about how do we retain people and maybe how do we change the mix of people that participate in disc golf, because the niche is maybe too narrow for widespread growth to take place. You know, you think about like, why is pickleball doing well? Well, everybody can play.
Yes.
Old people, young people, women, men, everybody. And
You
what
can
is
drop
disc
a
golf?
court on any park.
93% men and mostly 20 to 40-year-old men, white men.
Yep.
Like just a reality. And that is, how do we go beyond that? That to me still remains a very important question.
Imagine COVID didn't happen and take 2019, go to 2020 and like try and imagine what you think 2020 might have been like without COVID. That's probably the level that we need to get to. The issue is that that's it, like we would have been optimistic about it if we had gone up 10% in the industry, and instead it's requiring us to contract 20 to 30% to get back
off
to that
of
number
huge highs.
Exactly.
That's the thing. I feel
that
like
contraction is
people
what's
were not
hurting.
prepared for the inevitable outcome, which was that things were going to slow down.
Yeah. So
anyway, I remain long-term bullish about disc golf.
Yep.
But I do think we may need to lock in for pain in 2025. So let us know your thoughts. What does the industry need to do? What do manufacturers need to do? What do players need to do? What does the Pro Tour need to do? Email us, upshot@ultiworld.com. We will be discussing this topic even more. I think we're probably going to do a roundtable about the state of the industry right around the first of the year. So let us know if you have particular folks you'd love to hear from on that topic. That is going to do it for this edition of the Upshot. I believe, Josh, that we will do storylines bracket on Thursday.
I think that's right.
This is the plan. We may audible if necessary.
Yeah, we reserve the right to not commit to any plans that we tell you we're doing.
That's right. But we do have I will allow, I said Monday was the deadline. I will allow one more day of storylines and gaffes raffle entries if you're trying to win an Upshot mystery box. All you got to do is send us an email, upshot@ultiworld.com, with raffle somewhere in the subject line, and give us some storylines or gaffes or both. And if we select anything from your list, you will be automatically entered into the raffle. If you select something that is unique that nobody else thought of, you will get a bonus entry. And so by the end of today at midnight Eastern. Okay. So if you're hearing this is your last chance. All you got to do is send an email and you can win a free Upshot mystery box. And it's going to be a good one. All right. That's going to do it. We will talk to you on Thursday right here on the Upshot.